Oh, I was listening to a story with a writer from New York, the New York Times Sunday Magazine. She's also a fellow at Yale University, the Truman Capote Fellow at Yale Law, I think Yale Law School, writing fellow. But what really got my attention is when she said that Sessions and Bannon and Trump, they kind of hoodwinked into Trump into talking about crime and urban crime. Everybody knows that's a code word for black crime, and they were dog whistling. And then she said, well, everybody knows the crime has gone down over the last 15 years, except for a slight uptick recently. Well, that's my wheelhouse, because everybody doesn't know any such thing. Here's what people who use that number, here's what they are concealing. They're concealing that the crime numbers, as bad as they are, black crime versus white crime, the disparity is 8, 10, 1,000 times difference, depending on what crime you're talking about. But as bad as those numbers are, the real numbers are way, way worse because of witness intimidation, stitches for snitches. We talked about ShotSpotter in my book, Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. And we used a story we used two stories. I love two stories from the New York Times and Don't Make the Black Kids Angry that I talk about. One was about ShotSpotter when it was just new. That's where you put the microphones on telephone poles, and if a gunshot goes off, boom, 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 the computers pinpoint where it is. And all of a sudden, the 911's getting a call about ShotSpotter. So they found when they put the ShotSpotter in Oakland, California, that 90% of the gunshots, no one ever dialed 911. All this unreported crime in the ghetto. This is happening all over the country. They're finding out that there's all these crimes happening, nobody's reporting. When you talk, I've done lots and lots of videos on this. I'll put up my playlist, Witness Intimidation playlist. I think it's probably the most important playlist I have, because you got DAs all over the country going, listen, every act of violence, every murder in the black neighborhoods now, it's all about witness intimidation, and people are finding this out all over the country. And lots of people know it. Very few people, except here, are connecting the dots. Massive, massive impact on what we know about black criminality. So we've got stitches for snitches, witness intimidation. We've got mayors all over the country in Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, Minneapolis, Detroit, St. Paul, all over the country. The buzzword is criminal justice reform. That means we have to stop arresting people, parentheses, black people, since they're the ones getting arrested at a much higher rate. We have to stop arresting them because everybody knows the only reason they're getting arrested is because of the white racism of the police officers. The mayor of Baltimore, Stephanie Rawlings Blake, she was given space to destroy. Her first year in office, she was bragging that, we're gonna do criminal justice reform. She told her cops to stop arresting people, and her arrests in Baltimore went from 100,000 a year to 50,000 a year. This is all over the country. Harry Belafonte got up and gave an inauguration speech for de Blasio. This would have been, 4 years ago. He gets up and he goes, yeah, and we're going to stop arresting black people for no reason whatsoever because we arrest too many black people in this town, blah, blah, blah. 2 days later, Bloomberg's guy, big advisor, does a big editorial going, hey, we reduced the number of arrests in New York by 40% last year. What are you talking about? So that is a thing now, arresting fewer people. It used to be back in the day, there were quotas, go out and arrest somebody, make sure you're doing your job. Now they tell the cops, the buzzword is depolicing. I was talking with a cop from Chicago just the other day on the phone for like an hour. One of the things he told me was in the South Side now, when they get calls, the cops take their time. They don't want to get into it with the neighbors. They don't want to get into it with the criminals because they know in these neighborhoods, police are met with hostility, threats, and violence. So when the call comes in, they take their time. They want the person to get away. What do you think that does to the crime numbers in Chicago? Well, it does exactly what the politicians in Chicago want them to do. They go down. So a lot of people in Chicago are living in this little fairy tale land of, yeah, you know what? We see a lot of crime around Chicago. We see it in places we never saw it before. But the crime numbers are down, so so it must be okay, right? Lots of people are moving out of Chicago now because they know that Chicago is a lot more dangerous than the mayor and police chief and the numbers are telling us. And I was thinking of that when I saw, let's hear a little bit of the interview with this woman on Fresh Air with Terry Gross, where she can remind us about the crime going down.
Well, Bannon and Sessions share an ideology that they often talk about it as being anti-immigrant, and it is. But I think that it's broader than that. I think they really see the chief internal threat of the country as being the way the country's demographics are changing. We're going to go from being a country with about 30% of minority voters to about 40% in a few presidential cycles. And that, unless the Republican Party changes its platform, that will be a challenge to Republicans and to Trump's base of support, which is 90% white. But I also think there's a kind of deeper cultural discomfort with the growing population of people who are not white in this country, coming from a kind of traditional white sense of propriety of what America is about. That is what's motivating Sessions and Bannon, and that it's part of what's driving the more extreme elements of this presidency.
So the goal is to keep America more white and Christian?
Well, yes, I think, bluntly speaking, that's the case. And crime. One of the themes that Trump emphasized throughout his campaign and has continued to push as president is the idea that there's this very dark rise in crime happening, particularly in what he calls the inner cities. It's not statistically accurate. Actually, we've had a 25-year decline in crime with a small uptick in 2015. But Trump really pushes this notion that America is under threat and that there's all this danger.
Another thing they don't talk about when they talk about the crime numbers going down are Bronx juries. Talk about that and don't make the black kids angry, where black jurors tend not to convict black defendants. Big article in the New York Daily News and the Post, I think, where they talk about defense lawyers in Brooklyn and the Bronx. They're kind of all like they're in a panic because they used to have a very pure black jury pool. Now you got all these people gentrifying Brooklyn and the Bronx. The jury pool now is all these little yuppies who are down with the cause, but they're not down with somebody getting bonked over the head. And if they're in front of a jury and they see evidence saying somebody's getting bonked over the head and robbed or killed or something stolen, no, they take that very personal. They're actually convicting black people of crimes in black neighborhoods. So many reasons why the crime rate is down, down, down. I was thinking of that when I ran across this story from Cleveland. Let's give it a look.
I was wondering if anybody was coming out to do the fingerprints on both of my units that got robbed today.
Let's see. They should have called you.
They should have been here. We're talking should have. It shouldn't have happened across from a school in the middle of the afternoon either.
The caller, tired of waiting for a Cleveland police crime scene unit, a break-in off West 130th. The I-Team has shown you before. Police didn't have patrol officers to go to a man shot in the head, a shootout in the street, and more. Here, no one to come and gather evidence.
They just had a shooting in the second, so he's going to be tied up on that.
Okay, the shooting's not my problem. I got to get this place cleaned up. I got glass laying all over the place.
Not unusual to have to wait and wait for a Cleveland crime scene detective. You know, Cleveland CSI. The police union says often only one detective working the road at a time. In other words, one crime scene detective to handle every shooting, stabbing, break-in, and more in the city. Meantime, stories keep piling up about the shortage of Cleveland police. Last month, no patrol officers to send to a carjacking.
Any unit able to copy this code 1 for a male robbed a gunpoint of his vehicle?
Really an investment in crime reduction.
The mayor barely mentioned the chronic shortage of cops Thursday in his State of the City address. He did say the city is hiring more officers, but in a recent interview, he admitted bringing in and training any new cops takes months.
With police, just like fire and EMS, you just can't have, I'm going to hire this person, I'm going to hire that person. You can't.
Back to the caller for Cleveland CSI. Didn't like the wait or the dispatcher.
I don't live in the city, so I don't really care.
Otherwise, you would care a lot more.
Right, exactly. But I don't, so
yeah. Great customer service there, Chief.
How long is that guy going to have to wait for a cop to roll into his neighborhood? front page story, New York Times. Again, don't make the black kids angry. They talk about what it takes to get arrested for a crime. They talk about what it takes in New York now for somebody to like fill out a crime report. This lady got burglarized. She could describe him, the whole thing. The cops walking out the door he came to her house or a nice apartment, nice brownstone. She goes, "Aren't you going to take a report?" She goes, "No, why? We're not going to catch him. We don't really take reports unless we think we're going to catch him." She had to sit there and demand he take a report. No report, no crime, no number. And of course, we could do stories on witness intimidation all day long. I mean, here's just one I just grabbed out of the paper almost by accident. People who are foolish enough to go to the cops, black people in black neighborhoods who are foolish. You know what? It applies to white people too. I did a story out of, I'll put that up too, a story out of D.C. White guy came to the aid of somebody getting killed. He came to their aid. The mom said, "Are you sure you did the right thing? You sure, those black people that did that crime aren't going to come back and kill you since you know who they are?" He goes, "No, I'm not worried about that." They came back and killed him. Those are the numbers. More than a few years ago, my father-in-law was big friends with Charlie Rangel, the congressman. Remember him, the black congressman from Harlem? Took Adam Clayton Powell Jr.'s place. Anyway, Charlie had probably been in office, I don't know, a good 10 years, and he was at a dinner for my father-in-law. So I got a chance to hang out with him in the hotel room for like 2 hours before we all went over to the big dinner. And Charlie's regaling about 4 or 5 of us with these stories about how he'd be on TV or radio and somebody would ask him a question he couldn't answer. He said he would just make stuff up. And he gave lots of examples. He would just like pull studies out of nowhere, throw statistics out of nowhere, always leaving the people on the panel or on the other end of the interview going, "Oh man, I didn't know that." And that's what we see with the numbers surrounding black crime and violence. I mean, everybody is desperate to deny the obvious, that there's something really wrong with black criminality so wildly out of proportion. So people just fish these numbers out of an ocean of pain. They come up with this one number and they go, "Colin, you didn't realize that 120% of white people are killed by 262% of white people. You didn't know that, did you, Colin?" I mean, these are people that basically never learned how to balance their own checkbook. Now they're experts on statistics. Well, here's some numbers for you. 100% of the people that fish out phony numbers are in denial, deceit, and delusion about this level of black criminality that is hurting so many people, destroying so many lives, destroying so many cities around this country. Maybe in an alternate universe, we would expect reporters and public officials to speak up, to tell the truth, to connect the dots, especially next time they go to one of their Black Lives Matter rallies and we hear that black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything, especially why cops are always arresting black people for no reason whatsoever, especially why cops are always killing black people for no reason whatsoever. I mean, there's like 3 shows on TV right now. That's like their main theme. That's a lie. That's the greatest lie of our generation. I don't know any way to fight the lie except with the truth. That's what we're doing here on this channel, without racism, without rancor, without apology, even if it makes the black kids angry.